And since it's 7:29, we don't have to be exactly 7:30. So looks like we've got people enough to get something going here. So if you'd like to start, you go ahead, Randy.
There. Okay, hopefully you're all seeing the mesh map. I just loaded it off of the mesh network. And it's currently what things look like on a worldwide basis. And if we zoom into our northwest region here, you can see several tunnels running all over the place. Of course, our good friends in Yakima have quite a network going on. This network, the paths are not shown because they don't currently have their tunnel up to us. So the path data isn't live, but they continue to have a mix of 5 and 2.5 gig. And of course, Bud probably is in better position to speak to what's going on about mesh in Whatcom. Maybe I'll just finish off what I'm going to say, and then Bud, I'll bring the map up to Whatcom, and maybe you can give us some more direct status there. Let's talk about Seattle. So, over the last, 2 months, I guess, we moved the primary tunnel router to Seattle EOC, which was a little bit more stable location to have it than, say, under the shelf by my AHF radio in my ham shack. So it has things like UPS power and generators backing it up, and it's now connected on HamWAN. So that's this router here, the appropriately named W7ACS Seattle EOC router. The additional node funded by WSARC, but implemented by ACS at the Beacon site, has had filters put on it, and it's a Mikrotik 2 gig radio. There's a little tip here, which is the Mikrotik BaseBox radios have about 2 dB more of system transmit power and gain overall than does the Rockets. We put filters on this, put it in a box, and it's all using a new antenna as well from KP Performance Antennas. Had a nice mounting box in the bottom. This is working really, really well. And we're now seeing our 2.5 gig path work properly. For example, our path between Beacon and Admiral, I forget the distance of this, but it's fairly regularly there with a pretty decent metric. Additionally, Kurt WR5J in West Seattle is quite regularly connected. If we look at the link, he has quite a number of links working. Now, he doesn't have any filters because he doesn't have any cell sites near him. One of our main sites in West Seattle is Providence Mount St. Vincent. And you can see from the nomenclature we're using to name our sites, we're using the call sign, as you would expect, dash the city name, and then something that represents the site. Obviously, putting the full words Providence Mount St. Vincent wouldn't really be useful. So the reason for putting the city name in there is once we started tunneling to the AREDN main tunnel server, we started having call signs from all over, and it was a little bit hard to identify. So having the word Seattle in there just helps us identify where are the other Seattle nodes in the big list. We've got a reasonable number of people around West Seattle. We've got a cluster that's actually RF networked pretty well in the area called Delridge. We've got another cluster over here on the left. Now, there's a ridge of land between Delridge and this group west of California. So there isn't a good RF path, but we're effectively using tunnels from each of the clusters of users. And for example, we've got a couple tunnels, one that Frank looks after and one that Ken looks after coming out of this group. And now that we've got the RF connectivity up to Beacon, we're starting to think that maybe we could actually remove those tunnels at some point, maybe after we get some more work done at the Providence site. And then lastly, there's another cluster of users a little bit south, and this includes Alan and a few others, and they don't have RF connectivity to the group above them, and they don't have RF connectivity over the ridge to here. So in terms of developments, we have a site, as I mentioned, Providence Mount St. Vincent. The West Seattle Radio Club at the last board meeting authorized $3,000 for investment in the site. they're going to authorize purchase of a backbone link to HamWAN, which will be out to the Beacon site. HamWAN's asked us to use 60 gigahertz because this is a relatively short distance link and it won't cause 5 gig congestion. And we're discussing what additional equipment to put at Providence Mount St. Vincent, but most likely some sectors on 5 gigs and some better antennas for 2.5 gigs with down tilt. There's quite an elevation change down to Delridge, and having some mechanical down tilt would make things a little better. For example, Frank, who's on the call here, is located here and has a node, but he couldn't actually get up over the ridge to Providence to the left. So he very craftily worked with a neighbor ham and put another node up here on the hill and bounces up to the hill and then back into the mesh. Quickly, I'll just go over to Frank. Do you have anything to say about your little MacGyvering there?
No, but we do have to we do have to improve that antenna up the hill. It's just a TP link is all it is, and we got to get up there and put up a good Omni on Steve's garage roof, and I'm extremely confident that it will hit Beacon also. So it's going to help out a lot to get that station improved. Other than that,
Okay.
we had talked
Do you need
about
a radio? Do you need a radio and an Omni for that? Because I have one.
well, we've got what we need. It's a matter of getting up there and doing it. Just like South Seattle College, we talked about that, and I've been waiting for a decent day to get up there that I can get access and change things around and put a note up on South Seattle also. So that's basically all I've got.
So Frank, when you put something at South Seattle College, is it an Omni or is it directional?
Randy and I talked about an Omni.
So this is South Seattle College, and Olympic Hall is where we have radios on the roof.
Right.
It's on a decently high location. So it would shoot across the NWMESH over to Beacon, which is here. And it would also, of course, hit the Providence Mount St. Vincent node.
You bet.
And it's probably going to fill down this way quite a bit too.
Yeah, I'm still in a hole where I'm located, so I haven't actually put anything up yet. We're hoping something would get close enough to me to make it worth the effort.
I'm down here in Burien. That's me on a tunnel, and there ain't nobody else down here but me. But I did have a TP link out in the truck one day, and I was able to go up to 146, which is several streets north of me, and access the other TP link I have on the tower. So there's a bit of mesh coverage down here, but no other hams have got interested yet. I did take a couple initiatives, and I don't know if we have anybody on from Whatcom County or Squim or Olympia, but I've been working with Bob Sampson, K6MBY, helped him get a tunnel working from Squim to Seattle. And what I'm most proud about this tunnel is it runs entirely over HamWAN. So even though it shows a direct line and you might think it's internet, it's really going over to Lookout from his house. He has a HamWAN shot over to Lookout, which is over here somewhere. And then it uses the HamWAN backbone back to Seattle to the EOC. And then you can see that they have a growing little network up here. There's more network than they're showing on this map. They're starting to get locations in their nodes and so on. And I understand they're working towards Cascadia Rising exercise in June, and we'll be featuring AREDN in their area working with the Red Cross. So one of the things that we're working on coordinating is getting AREDN at the Seattle Red Cross. Bill N6NBN is a person who works regularly in the Red Cross facility, and we're going to get them a AREDN router, and then there will be a tunnel that Squim can get to the Red Cross, and they're going to do a demonstration during Cascadia Rising, being able to use AREDN and HamWAN to go from the Red Cross office in Squim to the Pacific Northwest, or whatever it's called, regional headquarters in Seattle. And then about a week ago, KT6MJ, I sent him a tunnel router. He was a person that was on AREDN, and he was sort of off by himself on the map. And I just picked up his call sign and emailed him and introduced myself and said, we're having a little fun up in Seattle with AREDN. And I know that it's not very exciting when you're off on a node by yourself. Can I help you? And we got along well on email. So I gifted him a AR750, sent it down by him post office with pre-configured, and he's on the air down in Olympia with the hope that maybe he will get a few buddies and get a little cluster going there. And then,
Randy, is there a club nearby to him?
I'm sure there are clubs, but I'm not sure if their clubs are involved in mesh. Same sort of deal with K7JB. He was up here in Bothell with a little bit of a network running already. And I said, well, if you're interested in joining in and having fun, and the great thing is when he did join in, he's got mesh map running and a few other services. So in fact, that's where I'm loading the mesh map from. And then lastly, before I turned over to Bud, we got Spokane on. There's not showing a link right now, but Cal NH7S in Cheney, he has a link to Hawaii, but he's also got a second one tunneled into Seattle. And my goal there was to help him get on. And you know, he said, oh, well, I'll pay you for the router and all that. I just need help. And I said, well, no, I'll get you on. All I want you to do is help someone else get on in your neighborhood so that there's two of you out there. So we're inching towards Spokane, and we're going to crack that one someday soon. Let me go up to the Bellingham Whatcom area, and maybe Bud would like to see a few.
You shut up.
So are you turning it over to me now, Randy, or?
Yes, if you want the map up, I'll just leave it there. And
yeah, go ahead and leave it there, and maybe you can zoom around. This is a little bit awkward in that the movers and the shakers in our AREDN network are involved in a meeting right now in Bellingham. Tonight is the first in-person meeting of the Whatcom Emergency Communications Group. And so WECG is meeting in person right now at the same time we're talking. And I was really glad to get this email from Randy because I would much rather be participating in a Zoom session. I'm still a little nervous. I have some lung issues and heart issues, and I was not excited about going to an in-person meeting in a small room with a crowd of people. And this I feel very comfortable with. But the key person here who would know the most and is basically driving the direction here. We have a saying: those that row the boat steer the boat. And our the guy with the hands on the oars is the newly elected president of WECG. So that's Andy KF7VOL. And he is not available to join us here tonight because he's presiding over another meeting. What we're doing, Randy mentioned a lookout. I have a HamWAN dish. I live on Birch Bay, and if you want to zoom in there, I think that's me. You just put your mouse on. If you zoom in there, I have a direct shot over water at Lookout Mountain. And so I have a dish up there for HamWAN, and my AREDN node then goes to HamWAN through that. And we have a couple other stations here in Whatcom County that also have links to Lookout via HamWAN. So we make good use of HamWAN to then create tunnels for our AREDN clusters. And the clusters, we're trying to build them, of course. In Ferndale, there's a few stations in there that are trying to create RF links to each other. And then Galen, KG7GCF, who has a link to HamWAN that would tie those together. We're trying to get that formulated and come together. There's another HamWAN link in Ferndale with Dave W7 WDM. Steve Stroh, NAGNJ, who's not available tonight because he's off in Dayton. There's something going on in Dayton about amateur radio. And so he's over there. He has an RF link as well to the search and rescue building, which is where the meeting is. The search and rescue building has a link to Lookout via HamWAN. And so I think the plan, as I understand it, is that we're going to try to create this backbone linking various stations together, or various islands or clusters together using HamWAN, predominantly through Lookout, although I think there's plans to get HamWAN on Mount Constitution, which especially me and a lot of other people can see. So we'll get this kind of a background bone going. We have a voice over IP network, so all of us have telephones on HamWAN and AREDN, and we can use, well, it's on AREDN, and then we use HamWAN to do the linking. So we can call each other on those phones. And I think you guys are doing some stuff with phones. Is that right, Andy? Randy? You're muted. Yeah.
We were on the HamWAN phone service, and I think we probably still have half a dozen people. Carl probably is very active, if anyone. You want to talk about that, Carl? I think you do probably more with IP, voice over IP, than most.
Well, we have initially, and I think Randy coordinated the initial setup, we had a pretty large group of CLACS members signed up for extensions on the HamWAN PBX, and it has extended. Snohomish County EOC has an extension on it. Seattle EOC has 3 extensions on it. Washington State EMD has HamWAN. I don't know if they've gotten VoIP on it yet, but the goal was to get 4-digit dialing between EOCs and key locations, and we're it's still going along. There was some trouble with the HamWAN PBX recently, but they've resolved that. Nigel sorted out whatever was going on and has it fixed now.
So yeah, I'm a little concerned, but I'm not one of the ones that's rowing that boat. The Whatcom County has ventured off, and we have our own VoIP network with 8 or 10 people that we can call and talk with. And at some point in time, I would like to see these two worlds come together. One thing that comes to my mind, if I understand the Grand Stream phone, we can have 2 lines. And so if in my head, and I don't know if I'm right, in my head I could see having 2 different. I could use one phone to be part of 2 different networks, so I would have access to people way down south. But we go quite a ways, and we have a history of migrants that have moved off but didn't leave us. To start with, Dave, WD0HHU, and I worked together at the Red Cross in Bellingham. He's a great guy, and he and I are really good friends, but he's from Texas, and he decided to move back to the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas, but he took all his equipment with him, and so we still have we created a tunnel down to Denton. Now he lives in a really interesting location because he's less than a mile away from a women's university down there. They have a 20-story women's dormitory on this campus, and on the roof of this dormitory there are a half a dozen or more antennas and repeaters and stuff, because I mean this is the highest point in that area. And the Dallas-Fort Worth area is really big on AREDN, and so there is an AREDN node on the roof of this dormitory that's less than a mile from his QTH. And so we created a tunnel from my place here in Birch Bay down to Denton, Texas, and he just took the little 750, you know, and stuck it out in his yard, and we linked it up, and our AREDN Mesh exploded with all of these nodes down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And this made a lot of people nervous because where did all these stations come from? So he was really new to the area and kind of decided that, and because of COVID, the radio clubs were not meeting in person. He decided it would be better if we waited until he could make contact himself with the people down there and say, hey, we could have this opportunity to link Dallas, Fort Worth with Northwest Washington. And so we kind of, it's a link we have mostly kept closed, but we've had it open, and it gets really exciting when it does, because the list is just, you scroll through stuff after stuff after stuff. So right now that's not turned on, but what was cool about that was it was an RF link into their network through that tunnel. Then another thing that has come up is that another one of our buddies here has moved down to the Phoenix, Arizona area, and I have a tunnel to him as well, but he's like some of the rest of these tunnels. You probably find these guys on the map. Do you find a link there, Randy, from me to Texas? And then there's one to the Phoenix area, but it's a standalone to Phoenix. Well, then I got a contact from, so I'm living less than 2 miles from the Canadian border. So 6 miles north of me is a ham named, is it Jim? Hang on. I gotta look at my list to get his call sign again. Yeah, it's Jim, VA7SHG, and he's less than 6 miles away from me, but he's in Canada. And so we got together. He built one of my Nexus boards, and we got things going. And we were talking AREDN, so we created a tunnel between me and Jim up in Surrey, and they have an extensive AREDN network that goes all up through the Inland Passage there, Vancouver Island and British Columbia. And so that was another opportunity to see the list explode. And the people up there started seeing, and oh, this might have happened, Brandy. You and I set up a tunnel temporarily there, and so we had West Seattle, we had the South Sound coming in through my node, and then Jim logged in, and all of a sudden we had, you know, a good hunk of British Columbia all in there, and they got excited. And what I need to know, and what we have to figure out, is do we create problems when we let our nodes, when we let our mesh get too large? And I think there was some situations, it was, I believe it was concern over some looping, but it was corrected with some firmware updates. So we shut that one down as well. We shut that tunnel down, kind of waiting to, you know, you open a tunnel to an area, and then all of a sudden their list doubles or triples or quadruples, and people get excited. So it's fun, and it's fun and exciting to do, but you kind of want to make sure that the people, everybody that you're playing with, are okay with what you're doing. Any comments on that?
It can be confusing just the way that it presents it. So I dialed into the Seattle ACS EOC node, which is interesting, I think, because you can see on the right-hand side here, the second entry is AREDN Tunnel, and it doesn't have a call sign. This is our link to the AREDN Tunnel Central Server. and I don't know where it's at. I think it's in California, but I could be wrong. So we've eventually got the centralized AREDN tunnel turned up, and rather than having sort of ad hoc tunnels to various other places, which is how we got started and we're very grateful for, we ended up getting a proper AREDN tunnel to their central server, and we get quite a few of our routes through that direction. And then the others in the neighbor list are other VPNs or tunnels coming out of the Seattle EOC. So obviously Ken is listed here, and Bob up in Squim. His node's called McMicken HamWAN, and K7JB over in Bothell, and Frank RSD, KD7DK Doug up in Ballard, and KK7PW, which is our node in West Seattle, one of them, KT6MJ in Olympia, and Carl, who's on here, LNX from West Seattle, and then the Beacon site, and then my house here, which is hosting the Burien node. And then through those nodes, we get all these on the left, and you can see that we're currently sitting at 1,309 nodes total lists or entries with 342 nodes. That's actually down. Sometimes it's up over 2,000. Most of ours are coming in through the AREDN tunnel server. And if we do have a problem, if there was some sort of emergency that was local and we didn't want that, we can certainly log into the EOC and drop that tunnel and reduce it just to the stuff that's in Washington, if we want to conserve resources or that sort of thing. So this is just an AR750 that I at the EOC, and we plan to keep it there. And officially, AREDN is not really a Seattle ACS tool, but there are a number of, I'll call it a research and development project. There are a number of peripheral things we do as Seattle ACS just to understand what's going on. And I think what you may see us do is we have a WinLink relay server that's running at the EOC. It's not fully in service yet. I think we're going to offer our WinLink relay through this Seattle EOC node, and it is also on HamWAN, so that our local WinLink nodes, should they lose internet connectivity, will fail over to the relay server at the EOC, and it will act as our local mail exchange in case of loss of internet more broadly. Anyway, there's a bunch there, but why don't I stop sharing the screen? That's probably a good enough status, but that's it for me. Does anyone else want to add anything on status?
Just one.
Go ahead, Carl.
One quick comment. We have put an AREDN node up at North Seattle College now. It's not tied to anything, and it's not even been tested, but that just went up a few days ago. So I'll give you more status eventually. Once we prove it's working good and functional, I'll coordinate with Randy to get a tunnel into it.
That's cool. And also, you're kind of the keeper of the Maple Leaf eventually having a node as well.
Maple Leaf has a node. We don't have access to it at the moment. So once that's accomplished, we'll get that tied in and potentially expand that also. So yeah, there's a couple of nodes in the north end of Seattle that are in existence, but aren't really doing a whole lot yet.
Okay,
I think what we're discovering is that the friendliness of AREDN software. Now, this might sound odd for people that have struggled with AREDN, but the friendliness of AREDN is a little bit step above the friendliness of HamWAN's setup. So it's a little bit easier to get a person onto AREDN and to get them doing useful things. That's not a slight against HamWAN. They offer a fantastic backbone service. We're obviously using it as part of this, but we've been able to get far more people in West Seattle on AREDN with very small investment and tinkering than we have able to get on HamWAN. Anyway, I'll stop there. Go ahead.
Frank had a comment?
I actually had three things, but I don't think Phil was finished. Did you have something to say, Phil?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. Three things. Number one, Red Cross had AREDN put up with a VoIP phone about 3 years ago, and it's aimed at Beacon, and it's a fantastic signal. The only thing that's not there is your tunnel router. Okay, number two, I think it'd be beneficial for you to know where Lookout Mountain is. I've spent hours and hours up there when I was doing Coast Guard auxiliary stuff with Joe McLean. And Lookout is actually south and a little east of Bellingham, pretty close. And it has a fantastic view all the way into Canada, Mount Constitution, and Everett. And I'm sure if you could see farther than Everett, you could see it from there. It's out on a peak. It's just above I-5. As you go northbound, I-5 takes a swing west, and then it swings north and goes into Bellingham. And it's kind of, you can almost see the site as you come north on I-5. Fantastic location. So file that away, Randy. It's if there was a way up there, it would be great. And the other thing I wanted to say is, Bud made a comment about all these stations on AREDN, and yeah, if you've ever tried to bring up stations, I had a list of like 1,200 here one day, and they're all listed by ETX, which is apparently some form of signal strength. If you try to access anybody with an ETX higher than 3, it's not reliable. You either won't get in, or you just flat won't, you won't be able to keep a connect with them. So why are we having all of these stations piled up that you can't access? That's something we need to keep in mind.
Did anyone else have a report?
Maybe just a quick share of the HamWAN screen, because we've talked a lot about the HamWAN sites. I won't take up much of your time here because it's just a quick one. But for those that haven't looked at the HamWAN network recently, so when we talk about Lookout, we're really referring to this site, which is the Lookout repeater site, but also where HamWAN is located. And you can see that it has a few connections, some of which Bud was describing. It also has a connection over to Victoria, BC, a backbone connection. And then, as I was mentioning earlier, Bob in Squim, he has a shot over the water and the islands up to it. So truly, it is a wonderful site. It has a backbone connection to Snohomish County DEM, which is the Payne Field location. And then, of course, we have the 2 sites in Seattle that ACS helps with, Buck Mountain, Haystack, and of course, Tiger Mountain, which was the site I showed you earlier. HamWAN.org if you want to see that. And of course, a lot of us are riding on the back of HamWAN to make these AREDN tunnels work. So back to you, John, for your schedule. I'll stop sharing.
Okay. I think we're at the point where we can do a round robin, and if you have something you want to share that's kind of unique to your situation, we'll do that. So I'll using my screen. I'll just start with Frank and work my way around.
I pretty much had my say tonight and shared
Okay.
what I've been doing, and so no, I don't have anything else.
Okay. And Phil, did you want to pitch in anything?
All I can tell you is I'm ready to get online on 2.4. Just need some weather to permit installing the antenna outside, and I'm up and running. The rest of it's been done. There's another guy down here. I think he's on tonight. Yeah, he is. Mark and I are about 2 miles apart, so we're going to try to connect. And from there, I'd like to see some other hams down here get on. As you know, HamWAN's dead for us down here, so we can't use it for a backlink. So we'll see where it goes, though, because we're just trying to get something going down here in Vancouver.
We're happy to give you a tunnel via internet, Phil, if that's helpful. We're not being so picky as to say that everything has to be over HamWAN, because we might wait a long time to get HamWAN restored. So and I realize an internet tunnel isn't going to make the MCOM people happy, but for the part where we want to learn how all this works and get it going, we'd be happy to plug you into the tunnel if that's helpful, because the more the merrier on this stuff, figuring it out.
I appreciate that. Once we get our link here up and going, we'll look at that. I'm not sold on whether it's important to MCOM or not, because our group down here doesn't seem to be too interested in high-speed multimedia. So we'll see where it goes from there. This is going to be a work in progress.
Okay, thank you. Carl, did you want to wrap up anything?
Seattle ACS desires to grow AREDN extensively throughout Seattle. How it's going to happen is yet to be determined. One thing we're going to be doing, we just coordinated for Cascadia Rising. Snohomish County is going to bring one of their vehicles down and deploy to support us. And we're going to position them somewhere near the North Seattle College and give them an AREDN connection into the HamWAN connection at that site. So just as a test of how it can all work. I think that's all the rest that I have to say for now. There are a number of sites around Seattle, a number of rooftops, sites isn't the right term, that could be very advantageous to us. And we're exploring how we can get on those and use those to grow AREDN nodes also.
Yeah, at the last meeting, I think it was you, Carl, you mentioned that the club or somebody could offer equipment to those locations that look like a good way to broaden the coverage. Have you had any more thoughts on that? I know that no one stepped up to do that, but maybe if we could figure out a way to make it a presentation to the board, our board or someone else's board too.
Yeah, as I recall, the thought was if you were talking about trying to get over this hill or someplace else. And
Yeah.
my thought was if you can find a ham that lives in one of those advantageous locations, approach them with, hey, we'll donate a AREDN node if you'll put it up at your house and use that as your bridge. And those are not expensive devices. So, you know, for $100, you could potentially fill some of the gaps, some of the linking points. And it was just a thought that came to my mind while we were discussing that. And,
It seems
and
like
I don't know if it's, you know, if West Seattle or ACS or anybody else wants to explore doing that, but it's a thought.
I like the idea. Mark, did you want to say anything about your situation?
Oh, maybe a couple of updates. I've currently got a Bullet M2 HP running AREDN software, but it's not outside yet. It's on a vertical collinear identical to this one. Hasn't seen anybody yet, but it is meshing with a NanoStation Loco M2. I had discovered going into my systems that for some reason they were reporting erroneous location data to the network. So I've pretty much deleted all of that misinformation. I'm not sure at this point whether I want to do the M900 back on the air or anything other than the 2 gigahertz. Phil is correct. He is about 2.2 miles due north of me. I'm a little apprehensive about the vegetation and housing that's in between us. The profile path that he ran indicated that a link is feasible. It's kind of a wait and see. Now, having said all of that, there have been in the past hams in the Clark County area interested in broadband HamNet. I think I got cut off there. There have been hams in the Vancouver area interested in the broadband HamNet, but that effort was abandoned a few years ago. And so we're in a position now to try to pick up and restart that. Now, just as a coincidence, I was over at the Legacy Salmon Creek Hospital and ran into in the hallway one of the ARES team members and had a brief discussion with him about putting either HamWAN or AREDN on the top of the Legacy Hospital. I think it's on a piece of real estate that's about 300 feet elevation, and then it's a It's about a 6 or 7 story structure above that. So that could be something eventually for everyone to, within visible sight, to link to. It could be very advantageous. And then in the discussion tonight, I've not done any tunneling so far. Others have discussed tunneling using a HAP. And I believe you're using right now the AR750. I'm not sure which one would be the most advantageous. The Mikrotik is a little bit difficult to flash with the AREDN firmware. I think the GLINet AR750 might be better, but which one is the most user-friendly as far as establishing links?
Randy, do you have a thought on that?
No, I do like the Mikrotik BaseBox because it's got about 2 dB more transmit gain than the Rocket M2. And I say that with the experience of the Beacon Tower site in Seattle. We had a Rocket there before and no filters. We added the filters, which of course helped because there's XM radio and a 2.5 gig cell site on the same building. And we're very pleased with the performance of the Mikrotik. It was a little bit weird because we had to use the PXE server to get the software on, but now that I've done it once, it's not a horrible process. And I like the BaseBox because it has a bit more gain on it. So if you've got
which one is the BaseBox?
I'll comment. I've got both GL750 and a Mikrotik. I like the Mikrotik is my preference. They're harder to set up initially. You're right. They're more difficult to flash, but once that's done, it's a better device.
So Randy, what are you holding up? You're muted.
This is a BaseBox 2, Mikrotik BaseBox, BASEBOXE, or BASEBOX 2, and it's 28 dBm, I think, transmitter, and it's an equivalent to the Rocket M2, just a different manufacturer. And I'm not saying it's better. It's just it's worked very good for us.
Did you have anything else, Mark? You're
No,
muted.
that's about it.
Okay.
Maybe someday down in Ocean Park, there will be showing up on the map some additional AREDN nodes.
Okay. But I had you muted because your microphone was ticking at us, and so if you want to unmute, you can.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that you did that, I have a bundle of wires over here, and we haven't been able to home in on it. But if are you hearing it now?
No, you're good.
All I have to do is move some of these wires that are speakers and microphones and a lot of USB connectors. Most of them aren't hooked up to anything, but it does tick. We got to figure that one out.
Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to say before we go?
Well, I've listened to the roundtable here, and I had some ideas, and I'm going like, well, I don't need to preach to the choir, that's for sure. There were some experiments that we ran, and one in particular, when my buddy Dave, as I mentioned, moved down to Texas, we decided what would happen if we used AREDN to put him onto my Nexus board.
You're ticking again.
Well,
Okay,
anyway,
well, go ahead.
we found out that he could easily access my network TNC over AREDN from there, and so he was connecting to a WinLink station, an RMS gateway here. And all he did was put in the IP address, and it worked. And I think we looked at this crazy idea and what would be the purpose of it. And in an MCOM situation where you might have a van and you're trying to run voice communications, but you also need to run digital or data communications at the same time. And there's just so many bands that we can use, and the interference that you might have if you've got some say packet radio running right next to a station that's doing voice communications, and all of a sudden the packet station starts transmitting, and so now you've got this issue of the two transmitters are too close to each other. And with a couple of these GLI 750s or whatever, we realized that we could put a data station in a truck and with a AREDN node on it, and then move that truck to the other end of the parking lot and park it there. And then the voice communications, you could have your MCOM in our van, with voice and data right next to each other, side by side, but use the AREDN link to run the transmitter at the other end of the parking lot and do all your data without desensing the receiver where the net control or whatever is trying to run a voice network both on the same band. And that became like, oh wow, that would be real easy to do and simple to do. So and we demonstrated that it would work even though we were thousands of miles apart. It could also work if you're only 2 or 3 football fields apart. So am I still ticking? I'll get out of here.
Yeah, you're ticking. Okay. Randy, you've said quite a bit. Did you have anything left to say?
Well, I want to make sure Steve gets a go before I've got one additional little thing, if it's appropriate, we can tell you what we're doing with the Highline Club, but I don't want to take away from Steve's opportunity.
Okay, I'll let Steve go next. Steve, did you want to pitch in with some thoughts? Hey, Steve, are you there? Hi, Steve. Maybe he went to lunch. He's muting and unmuting himself. So, Steve, are you there? And do you want to say anything? Hello, Steve.
I think he went out for coffee.
Okay. Yeah, he keeps muting and unmuting, so I keep thinking he's trying to get through. Randy, why don't you go ahead and get the final say?
Well, the Highline Radio Club, which is the group of hams that covers SeaTac, Des Moines, Burien, North Highline, which is unincorporated King County, otherwise known as White Center, and Normandy Park, the city of 6,000 people. We were the recipient, or are the recipient, of a $183,000 grant from ARDC to deploy several things, but equip fire stations with antennas and radios. And one of the proposals as part of our grant was to deploy a HamWAN site in South King County. So we've been working with the Highline Water District, which owns several water towers, and we did a presentation to their board about amateur radio and assistance to the water district in the event of an earthquake. And they really liked what they heard, and they invited us back. And this week we did a site survey of three water tanks. So the current one that's being discussed with HamWAN is McMicken Heights, which is 505 feet or 4 feet elevation, directly east of SeaTac Airport. And it's at the bottom end of the NWMESH Valley. It's a site where there's the water tank. The BNSF Railroad has a tower. There's a couple cell sites. It's kind of like the highest thing going. And if I could run screen share here. So it would be a 3-sector HamWAN deployment if HamWAN agrees to move forward with us. A north sector would cover South Seattle. And I forget what the radius is on this, but I think it's about 8 miles to Beacon, where there's an existing cell site for HamWAN. The advantage, and I'll get to maybe the advantages of it in a little bit, but the areas that it covers are the Valley, including Renton, Kent, and Auburn. Part of what has coverage today from Tiger, but is shielded. And it also covers up the NWMESH Valley, but it does a little bit different than Beacon. And then it covers the SeaTac area sufficiently well enough that you could have a HamWAN station anywhere on the tarmac at SeaTac on a tripod, and we could give you a 3 or 5 meg connection to HamWAN. So obvious advantages for emergencies there if you want connectivity anywhere around the airport in an emergency. It has backbone paths to Beacon Tower, which is a Seattle ACS site, East Tiger Mountain, which is the Puget Sound RTTY site, possibly a Mike and Key site up on Tiger Mountain. And it has the path profile to Baldy. So backbone wise, it's very connectable. And then with respect to McMicken Heights versus Beacon, this plot shows the line of sight from Beacon in blue and the line of sight from McMicken Heights in red. And of course, anywhere where you see sort of the weird purpley color is where they're both overlapping. So you can see where Beacon lights up in blue along the western side of the NWMESH Valley. And otherwise, without McMicken, the west or the east side would not be covered because of the shadow of the hill. So we think these two sites complement each other, one from the south, one from the north, slightly different angles towards the hill. And it might help a few people around South Seattle get a HamWAN connection. Moving along, similar sort of thing. Blue is the East Tiger site now. Red is still McMicken. And you can see that East Tiger does light up a huge area. It's really a wonderful, wonderful site. But this area down through the Green River Valley, Kent, Renton, the bulk of their town centers, some places have connectivity, some don't. And we think that the McMicken site would help those out. And then also smattered throughout our whole area would help generally with some of the HamWAN coverage. And one of the comments back from HamWAN was they think that some of the backbone diversity this creates could be good as well, because today in the bigger scheme, East Tiger is connected to Everett and connected to Camp Murray, but it's not connected to anything in the Seattle area. So this would get a new connection between that. And we're talking about whether the Beacon to Baldy link is interrupted to provide the McMicken site, or just how all that works. So there's a discussion going on between the Highline Club and HamWAN. This prospectively looks like it's something that could be implemented this summer. The funding is in place with the $183,000 grant that's doing a whole bunch of stuff. And I thought I would just take the opportunity to give you a brief preview of it and tell you that we're heading that direction. And if I were to wager, I would say maybe a 70% chance of it going ahead based on the funding and the preliminary answer from the water company saying we can use their tower. It's really just up to HamWAN to say, can we do this?
That's great news, Randy. I really hope we get that kind of coverage. So what does it take for an individual to get a HamWAN connection going, just for your own use? Is that something should or couldn't be done?
Carl knows this as well as I do, and Bud as well. I think what it takes is you get a friend that's got a HamWAN dish to come over and prove that it works from your house as the first step. Then once you've proved that it works, then that friend will tell you what gear to buy. Dog, be quiet. That friend will tell you what equipment to then buy. I've seen too many hams try and buy the equipment first, thinking it will work, and then either ending up with the wrong equipment because there's some peculiarities there, or just ending up with a sad state where they got the equipment and some bloody trees in the way. So my strongest suggestion is get a friend who's got a portable system to come over, prove out that it's going to work from your place, and then that person can be your mentor towards getting HamWAN going.
That's sound advice.
I would
Randy,
precede his steps with one other step. Do use some computer tool to calculate line of sight from your location to the HamWAN sites, and see if modeling even shows there's a possibility of a path. Once you see that, once you see a possibility of a path, then you know what to try to test with.
What we've been doing here in Whatcom County, it works quite well, is that we have a spare setup. And so we'll go out to somebody's house, set it up, point the dish, get it working, and if it works, they keep it and buy us a new spare.
Wow, what a deal. How many of you put out using that method?
I'm going to say, well, 3. Yeah, 3.
3 of them?
So it's just having the spare in rotation. When you go to all the trouble of hanging this thing out to test it to see if it works, why take it down and go buy a new one and put it back up? You just say, okay, you got it. Go buy a new one and we'll use it for the next guy.
So, Bud, do you have a material list for that portable unit?
Yeah, we have it. I don't have it on. Andy would be the right guy to talk to, but yeah.
It's probably a Dynadish 5 international version.
Yeah.
Little white dish that's about
we're using the larger dish, but it's just a great system because by the time you've bought the stuff, then that becomes the one that's in rotation. So
I like it.
Yeah, it just works.
I like that idea. Okay, guys, I think we had a really good session here. A lot of information. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up? I will be sending out a link to the recording in case you want to share it with somebody.
But I think I'm seeing real benefit of the regional implications of this meeting, and I've learned a few things tonight. I'm really glad to have our friends from south of the state in, and Bud, thank you for joining. And I'm excited to have this group of people really focused on kind of ham networking, mesh, HamWAN. It's all good as far as I'm concerned. I think as we look at the tunnel server at Seattle EOC, I would love to get a contact in Spokane that has a good site to host another tunnel server. And then we could end up having one in the east part of the state, one in the west part of the state, and get a bit of diversity going with our tunnel servers to keep our state all well connected. And some of these more important sites could have a tunnel into both of those. So if one site failed or something, we've got a bit of redundancy. So if anyone knows anybody in Greater Spokane that might have a data center or someplace to host a tunnel, or even just a fiber optic internet connection, I think there's an opportunity to start growing a tunnel server in Eastern Washington so that we have some protection against failures, I guess is the way to describe it.
So Randy, when you get a contact, let me put it on the distribution so they'll be reminded of our meetings. Okay.
Randy, Yakima is already a densely active AREDN community. Why not explore something in that area?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, if we think that that's diverse enough, and certainly we have examples for the state where they believe it's diverse enough because they, like for the state radio system, they have the primary controller for it in Olympia and the backup controller in Yakima. So maybe that's the model we follow. And then ultimately, if we ever get HamWAN across the mountains, we end up with our own HamWAN link between them as well.
I know somebody in the Yakima area that might have a good data center. We could put something in. I'll reach out to him.
So Carl, when you have a contact and they have an interest, I'll put them on the list, on the distribution list.
Yeah, I'm not sure he'd be interested in getting personally active in AREDN, but
Yeah.
you might be able to squeeze into a location that would have a lot of connectivity.
Okay. Okay, guys. Last chance. Speak your mind.
Nothing
So
here.
is this format working for people? Do we need to tweak it? Okay, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And
John, we owe you a round of thanks for being the chair. It's not always an easy job. Thanks for pulling it together, sending out the meeting invites, steering the mailing list. If we don't say thanks, hear it now. Thank you.
No, thank
Great
you for
job.
thinking. Yeah, I'm learning a lot, and I appreciate the your feedback. Okay, guys, it's now 8:29, 1 hour, so that's pretty good. We'll I'll send out another link to the YouTube. I'm putting them on YouTube. Does anyone have a problem with that? Okay, so that's what I'll do, and I'll send you a link. Okay, guys, until next time.
It reminds me of the early days of packet radio, except we have Zoom to work with now.
Mhm.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.